Well, good morning, guys. This is Wednesday. Our reading for Tuesdays with Morrie today covers kind of a big section. I'm away from my desk area and back in my little reading corner I have. And because the lighting is so bad in this room at this point, and I figured I'd try to. I don't know why I want better lighting on my face, but still. So I'm gonna sit over here today in my comfy chair and hopefully give you guys some important things to think about. Because let me tell you something. The first chapter in this reading today is maybe the most important one in the book. Now I'm going to say that several times. It's like somebody who asks, what's your favorite song on this album, and five of the songs are your favorite. So, but this one really has some important and powerful stuff. So we're going to look at it. The first one we're going to look at today is entitled "The Classroom," and again, we're still on that initial like setting up of the organizational pattern he's going to use. We are going to get to the first Tuesday in this reading, and then we'll see how he kind of sets up the rest of the book. All right. So starting with the classroom. He talks about or Morrie's talking to Mitch about, and this is still in their initial visit when he first comes to visiting. And he says, I've become really interesting now that I'm dying. In other words, people didn't really care much before, but now they seem to have taken an interest in me. And, this is one of those sad things about human nature, again, is that we take things for granted. The more and more, we're used to something, the more we just kind of overlook it. Like we assume it's always going to be there. And he realizes now that there's a good chance he's not going to be there for another year. People have started to take a lot bigger interest in him. Points out, I'm on the last great journey here, and people wanted me to tell them what to pack. And so he's got this image right now of, that people think that because he's so close to death, he's got some sort of insight. Because, one of the greatest fears people have is of death. It's really the unknown. It's not so much the death part, especially if you're a Christian. I mean, you believe that there's more after death, and in fact, it's better after death. And so many of us believe that wholeheartedly, and yet we still find ourselves scared of dying. Again, I think it really comes down to the unknown. And so people are like, you're facing this more. What should I do to get ready? That sort of thing. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm repping for the baseball team today, but that's just disturbing me. So let me fix that. Look a little more professional. All right. Anyway, he does something really neat here, and I've gotten on side tangents on this section in class, so maybe having a video will help me to rein that in. But at this point, there's a phone call, and his wife comes in and says, "Hey, Morrie, it's so and so on the phone. Can you talk?" I don't think she even tells him who it is. No, she doesn't. She just says, "Morrie, can you talk?" And he doesn't ask. He says, "No, tell him to wait. I'm with this person right now." This is something that every time I read this kind of hits me close to home because I'm not a big tech person. I love technology, but it doesn't run me. I'm not addicted to my phone. I'm not attached to it all the time. Even in this lockdown quarantine thing, my screen time hasn't increased greatly. The parts that have are returning emails to you guys, but I'm not good about when I'm with people being totally with them because there's I'm thinking of other things. Things do distract me. If I do get an email, I'll check it and stuff like that. But Morrie is like, no, I'm with this person right now, and I want to give them 100% of my attention and let them know that they matter to me, and I'm not going to be distracted by other things. I don't know very many people in our world who are like that. Even at work, when I'm talking to my the administration or when I'm talking to other teachers, it's like our phones are constantly going off and they'll be constantly looking down, looking at that. And it's like you can barely even have a conversation with people these days without there being interruptions. And it does send a bad message that, you just aren't that important to me. And so Morrie doesn't do that. He's like, no, I'm visiting with my old friend, and anyone else and everything else out there can wait right now. And that's kind of a powerful statement. Now, one of the things that happens in this chapter that's a brilliant piece of writing is, and you're going to see it. I'm going to hold it up here to the screen. I'm not sure you guys can see it. It's right here. I got it circled. There it is. Okay. He says, "What happened to me?" He's going to repeat that multiple times in this section because in this conversation, Mitch Albom is realizing something that kind of hits a lot of us adults. Once you kind of get into the swing of things and you start adulting and you get farther along, you start to realize all of that stuff, that all the idealism I had back when I was a younger person, early 20s, getting through college and stuff. I've become a pessimistic jerk, and I've kind of lost track of those things. Those ideals that once, I was going to change the world, and now I'm just getting by. And he realizes that. He constantly says, "What happened to me?" He's going to say it, I believe, 3 different times in this small section. He says, "I traded lots of dreams for a bigger paycheck, and I never even realized I was doing it." And that is the curse of adulthood. You do have dreams, even if it's something as simple as, I want to be a doctor, but I want to travel overseas and help people in poor parts of the world who have no access to medical care. But then you get out of medical school, you've got these huge, like, crippling debts, and you start looking at, I guess I'll just take a job working at this hospital I've been at. It's a good job. But, once I pay off my loans, I'm going to move on. But then you get used to the money, and, you find yourself staring down the barrel of 40 or 45 or 50 and realizing that you never did those things. Then you start convincing yourself it's too late, and all those dreams are gone. Actually, this is one of the areas where I feel kind of akin to our narrator here. He's going to talk in a little bit about it. His dream was to be a piano player. He wanted to be a musician. And guys, he gives it up because for the security of a regular job. I know his feeling. That was throughout high school and the early parts of college. That was always the dream for me, not to be a piano player, but to be a musician. And then even when I got my first real job as a youth minister, it was really a side gig for the band I was playing in. And we travel around and played, never did any big crowds or anything, but the goal was, I loved that. I mean, a perfect life for me would have been traveling around in a stinky van with a group of guys and going and playing on Tuesday nights to a crowd full of 40. I mean, I would have been excited about that. Working my day job and going at night and hanging out with my friends and playing music. But, I got married, and, we had Maddox a year after getting married. And at that point, you needed security. And, every time I watch a video or every time I go to a live show, I miss it. I'm like, why didn't I do this? And Mitch Albom's realizing that right here. He's realizing that he gave up on a lot of dreams for a paycheck. And this is what adults do. And you can say it's responsible and it's the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's not, but it hurts. It definitely does. Okay. So then, on this page, again, we see the what happened to me, the parts I've circled. I'm sorry, everything's mirror image when I do this, so it looks awkward. But again, we have it here and then back up here where he says, what happened to me? What happened to me? He talks about he was going to join the Peace Corps. He's going to do all these things, and now he's making a ton of money working as a newspaper person. And our society tells you that that's the goal, is to make that big paycheck and, to be a provider, which, being a provider, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we buy into, and Morrie comments on this later about the culture. We're going to get to that. But the idea here is that, maybe some of us buy into some things that while they're good for some people, maybe they're not for everybody. Maybe if your dream has always been to be be a musician and being in a band, then maybe rushing out and getting married really early, which, by the way, I didn't do. I didn't get married till I was nearly 30. But, that maybe people shouldn't be getting married straight out of high school, because then you do put yourself in a position where you do need to provide for your family and be a responsible person. But, at the end of the day, whether you're making this huge paycheck and sending your kids to the best schools and buying the nicest cars, or whether you're, just getting by but still enjoying your life, I mean, who's to say which one's better? All right. Anyway, I'm on a tangent here. I told you I can get off on this one. We get to this next part. He says, dying, Morrie suddenly said, is only one thing to be sad over, Mitch. Living unhappily is something else. So many of the people who come to visit me are unhappy. I think that is a powerful statement, that he's like, dying is something to be sad about, but in all honesty, dying is a moment. What about living unhappily for 40 years? This is why picking a career that you love is so essential. You guys kind of fall into this category, or fall into this habit of believing that every few years you get this big change. Okay. You were in elementary school for a long time, up through, 5th grade, but then 6th grade happens and you're in a middle school and you're different. And then, you get tired of that. Well, 9th grade's coming down the line, and then you get to be in the high school. And by the time 12th grade hits and you're tired of that, now you're going off to college. And then you got a few years of college, and then you get to start in the real world. But that's when things start to get a little hairy, because then you're looking at, what's my next big thing? Marriage. Some people rush into that. Having kids, people rush into that. But then you end up in this 40-year career. And if you're doing something you hate just to make money, it's really not worth it. you really need to find something you love. There's nothing wrong with making money. If you have a passion to be a doctor or a lawyer, do it. I mean, God puts passions in you for a reason. So get out there and be the best doctor or lawyer you can be. But if your passion is to be a starving musician, then get on that. All right. You can go be the manager at Best Buy and make, $50,000 a year and, be able to pay all your bills on time and everything. And you can feel like, hey, you know what? This life is miserable and I hate it. Or you can be that person who is a doctor and is making six figures and loves what you're doing. That's okay. We're all designed differently. I think people have a hard time understanding this about me. I have a family that I have to support, and I feel like that's a priority. So I don't mind that. Although, I am a teacher, and that's not a high income position. But I mean, it's better than you think it is. It's better than we make it sound. And plus, my wife's a nurse, and she makes good money, and our family does okay. All right. But I still, I would be happy. I've told people before, I would be happy living in a little dinky studio apartment, even if it was with my wife and, with Maddox. I mean, Alan's 20 something. Hopefully he wouldn't still be living in the apartment with us. But I still would be happy with that because money's not a big thing for me. I mean, I want to be able to survive. I like to eat. You guys have seen me. But I mean, at the end of the day, this idea of having a big fat bank account is just it's a cultural idea that doesn't fit, and that is what when Morrie gets to this point, and it's a really big one in this book. It says, for one thing, the culture we have does not make people feel good about themselves. We're teaching the wrong things, and you have to be strong enough to say if the culture doesn't work, don't buy it, and that's it. Okay, we're teaching people that this is what you should be. Here's the image. This is what a real American looks like. And the fact is that that's true for some people, not for everyone. And people who don't reach it start to feel bad about themselves, and we shouldn't do that. All right, we should live the lives that we feel called to live. All right, if God wants you to be a doctor, then great. You won the bank account lottery. Congratulations. But if he called you to be a social worker and impact the lives of kids who have no advocates for themselves and you're barely scraping by, that's a good living too. One is not superior to the other. The only one that's superior, I guess, is the one where the person's happy. You have to be happy with what you do. You have to be able to look in the mirror at the end of the night before you lay down and put your head on that pillow and say, I'm doing something that I care about. And if you're not, you're not going to be happy. All right. Morrie goes on to talk some more. This section is really about him coming to terms with dying and trying to convince Mitch that as well. I think he's trying to prepare him for the inevitable, that he doesn't have much time left. He says, you mustn't be afraid of my dying. I've had a good life, and we all know it's going to happen. All right. But look at the way he accepts his situation. That's such a cool element of this guy. Morrie is such an impressive human being. And it's great that was a real person, too. This isn't a made-up character. You can even go and find some of those, the ones that said the audio-visual, where they're the interviews with Ted Koppel. You can still find those. You could actually see this man if you really dug. All right? We go into another one of the little italicized sections. Again, yours is just going to run together. But, here's technically the end of the classroom. And then there's this little brief, section here. All right, before we get into the next part, which is taking attendance. But in this part, again, we do a flashback where Mitch is thinking about it. He says, before college, I didn't know the study of human relationships could be considered scholarly. Until I met Morrie, I didn't believe it. So he's talking about a common belief in colleges where you study things like sociology and you study psychology. And some of these classes bend to how human relationships work. And the common theory is that there's not patterns to these. It's just each of us is this special little snowflake, and we all interact differently, and there's no way you can codify this into a system. But the fact is you can. We can study human relationships and see and learn how people interact. And the fact is that, yes, people do interact differently, but there's not as many differences as you would think. And learning these things can help you be a better communicator. And that's what these classes were about that he was taking with Morrie, who's understanding how people work. The last line in this is a really key one. And it'll come up again near the end of the book. So Morrie's describing to Mitch this wrestling match, this tension we have inside of ourselves to pull one way or the other in our life. And he says, Mitch says, sounds like a wrestling match. I say, a wrestling match. He laughs. Yes, you could describe life that way. So which side wins? I asked. Which side wins? He smiles at me, the crinkled eyes, the crooked teeth. Love wins. Love always wins. And that is like the mantra of Morrie's life, is that, that's going to be what wins out at the end of the day. Always, all right, is the concept of love, loving others and loving yourself, all right? So our next section is taking attendance, okay? And this is going to be setting up for how Mitch ends up coming each week to see Morrie, all right? He's talking about flying to Wimbledon, which is a huge event in England, tennis event. And he's thinking about Morrie's talking about culture and how it doesn't make us feel good. And he's looking around at what he's doing right then. And he realizes how much of culture just really deep down doesn't make him happy. He's talking about Morrie. He said he had created a cocoon of human activities, conversation, interaction, affection, and he filled his life like an overflowing soup bowl. He's like, Morrie found the things he loves and he surrounded himself with it, whether it was before he was diagnosed with ALS or afterwards. He has convinced himself that the thing he cares about most is relationships. So what does he do? He surrounds himself with people. He makes appointments to see people. He invites people over. He does everything he can to surround himself with the things he loves. And Mitch points out, I had also developed my own culture, work. All right. The key here is that he doesn't love work. He's doing it because, once again, culture says that this is what a man does. You get a job, you work yourself into the grave. That's what you do because that's how you're supposed to live. And it's not. It's just not. Yes, people should work. I want you to understand there's not an either or. It's not I work 80 hours a week and hate my life, or I lay on the couch and don't do anything. There is this happy medium. Your job is essential. You should do something that's fulfilling. You should get out there and make a difference, but you are not your job. You're just not. There is this other element of you that should also be in existence, all right? And Mitch Albom's falling into the trap that so many men and a lot of women today too fall into, and that's the idea that I am my job. I know that I do that daily. I want to be the, if I feel bad about saying this even, but I'll admit it. If I hear someone else saying, "Man, I really love so and so's class," and I'm like, "Well, I only love my class. What did I do wrong? I need to spend more time figuring this out." And I will, instead of spending time with my children, come home and dig into studying so that my lectures will be better, so that I don't, because that one kid fell asleep and I can't have that happen again. So I'm getting really long-winded. I apologize, guys. If we skip down a little bit, he's thinking about another thing Morrie told him. He said, so many people walk around with a meaningless life. They seem half asleep, even when they're busy doing things they think are important. This is because they're chasing the wrong things. The way you get meaning into your life is to devote yourself to loving others. Devote yourself to your community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. And, if we're going to highlight sections of this book that you need to look at on a daily basis, that's one of them. All right. We chase the wrong things in life. I asked you in your questions to think about this. And, that's going to be our challenge for today, is to think about, the things you chase now. The thing is, as a teenager, you're really just chasing things like, getting done with work and having a good time. And again, shouldn't be the case. You look at these kids that we see documentaries about, or they write news articles about these kids who are 13, 14, 15, 16, who are, contributing to their community and doing all these amazing things. You're like, wow, how did those kids get started that way? Because they picked something they loved and they decided to do something. You don't have to be 42 to make a difference. You can be 16 and make a difference. You got to start chasing something that matters, though. And again, God's put passions in you. Chase the things that matter. Stop chasing stupid, meaningless things. All right. So by the end of this chapter, they decide that they're going to meet on Tuesdays because there's I think we find out about the newspaper strike here. Yeah, it's in this section. They go on a strike. So really, and the way a union works is if you all decide as a group, none of us are coming into work. So now they've got, like we're in quarantine right now. It was the same kind of concept, except it's chosen by your union leaders. And so until they meet their demands, the paper owners do, these guys weren't going to come into work. So Mitch has this amount of free time now, and he decides, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fly out here every Tuesday and sit with you, and we're going to pick a topic to talk about. And that's kind of what sets up the rest of the book. We do have another little italicized passage here, and this is just where it establishes that Mitch wanted to be a piano player. He actually was a pretty good one, too. And he wants to be that. Of course, he changes his mind and becomes a writer. And then we end up in the first Tuesday. Now we're in the meat of the book. Okay, the rest of this book is really going to revolve around, I believe it's 12 to 13 Tuesdays that they meet, and they just sit and talk. And each one will say, the first or second or third Tuesday, and then it'll say, we talk about blank. And this one's the generic one. We talk about the world, all right, the world in general, all right? So now they've got this plan, and I think Mitch Albom the whole time was deciding, I'm going to put this all together and put this into a book and get it out there, not because he's worried about it for himself, but because he wants the rest of the world to know this guy, because he realizes what an amazing man Morrie is, and he wants the world to realize this. He doesn't want his message to be confined to that classroom. He wants it to go to everybody. So, so he gets there, he walks into the room, and they decide to sit down and just start talking. There's a lot that goes on here narrative-wise that I'm not going to discuss because I'm at 20 minutes now, but I do want to hit the high points in this, okay? Morrie talks about, the key to life, kind of an interesting thing. It's kind of joking. He talks about, let me read this little section. He says, I have to look at life uniquely now. Let's face it. I can't go shopping. I can't take care of the bank accounts. I can't take out the garbage, but I can sit here with my dwindling days and look at what I think is important in life. I have both the time and the reason to do that. And Mitch says, so I said in my reflexively cynical response, I guess the key to finding the meaning of life is to stop taking out the garbage. And he laughed. The point he's saying is now that I can't do things, I have time to think about what's important. I've quit filling my mind with busyness, and now I have an opportunity. Now, this is kind of the meat of it. It says they talk about the world, but really that's not what they're doing here. He says, it's hard to explain, Mitch. Now that I'm suffering, I feel closer to people who suffer than I ever did before. So he's pointing out now that because of his suffering, he understands other people's suffering. All right. I think that's one of the problems we have with lack of empathy in our world. We just don't seem to see what other people are going through. You look right now, we've got billionaires and millionaires posting videos of, them in quarantine in their house that I wish I had, and then you've got other people who can't pay their, $600 a month rent on their apartment while these celebrities are posting videos singing a John Lennon song about not having possessions while they're singing it on their, $4,000 computer. It's ridiculous. So the point he's making here is that it's hard for those people to know what it's like to be us. And it's hard for us to know what it's like to be, people who, can't even pay the bills right now. All right. And some of your families may be in that situation, to be honest with you. So at that point, you watch the news and you see other people suffering and you get it at this point. Morrie talks about crying all the time, and this is something, again, that I feel some real resonance with Mitch Albom. I'm uncomfortable with people crying. I'm definitely uncomfortable with men crying, okay? And I realize I shouldn't be that way. This isn't toxic masculinity. I'm not teaching you not to be comfortable with crying, but I am not comfortable with it. It makes me very uncomfortable when I see a guy crying. I don't know how to handle it. It makes me uncomfortable when I see a girl crying too, by the way. Many girls that I've taught in the past have learned this. They'll have a bad day. They're in my room. They burst down in tears, and you just see me go into this complete awkward mode where I'm just like, and I don't know what to say or do to make them feel better, and I just don't like it. He points out, he says, amazing, I thought. I worked in the news business. I covered stories where people died. I interviewed grieving family members. I even attended funerals. I never cried. Mourning for the suffering of people half a world away was weeping. Is this what comes to at the end, I wondered? Maybe death is the great equalizer, the one big thing that can finally make strangers shed a tear for one another. Isn't that sad? We have to wait till we're all about to die to realize this. It's kind of a frightening moment. But then we get to the end of the section. And again, Morrie starts focusing on the concept of love. He says the most important thing in life is to learn how to give out love and how to let love come in. So there's two parts to that, and we seem to think about the first, but not the second. It's important to let people know you love them. It's important to get out there and share that with you. It costs you nothing at all. Some of you have you don't realize how much it's impacted me to hear some of the nice comments I've heard from you this week. It has made me it's reinvigorated me and got me to sit down and want to reach out to you guys, as opposed to just feeling like this is a job. No, this is more than that right now. This is a chance to reach out to you guys and try to help you get meaning out of this situation, even if it's just for 25 minutes. All right. But he says you also have to let love in. You have to learn to be loved. And that is something that we struggle with in our world today. We constantly think we're not that worthy. We constantly think we don't meet the requirements of what should be loved. We constantly look at our flaws instead of the things that are great about us, and our culture does that. Our culture fills us with these ideas about, you're not skinny enough, you're not tall enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good looking enough. And then we just let that weigh on our shoulders and push us down when we shouldn't be. We should learn that God's built us with these amazing traits. And sure, we have flaws too, but those aren't what we should focus on. We need to look at the positives that we have and, the things that we do contribute, and to allow people to love us, which seems like who doesn't let people love them? Most of you don't, to be honest. Says, and he points this out, another common statement in this book: love is the only rational act. He says most of what we do has no purpose. He says, but love does, and love is he thinks it's the only rational act. I think that's a little bit grand of a statement, but maybe so. It does make sense, you know, and it's such an easy thing. I never will understand why people are mean to each other for no reason, especially in like a high school and middle school setting. Why, you pick this one kid in class who's just different than everyone else, and you decide you need to torment that person. Why? When it's so much easier just to be nice to people, just to go out and say, hey, I appreciate what you did, or hey, man, that was a really cool answer you gave in class. Just anything small that could make someone's difference, and you realize you can make their life better, yet you choose to be a jerk and make someone miserable. It just doesn't make sense. He's right. That's exceptionally irrational. I mean, think about how great the world would be if everybody chose just to say nice things to each other. And no one can control what's in your head. You may think this person's the biggest dork I've ever met. There's no reason for you to put that into words and put that out there in the universe, though. There's just not. What good comes of it? What are you doing by saying that? Absolutely nothing. Everything should be based around loving others. There's no amount of this hateful behavior should happen. Facebook shouldn't exist except to like share pictures of your family, your grandkids, your pets, whatever. None of this just tirades about just the nonsense you see on there constantly. What are you getting out of that? Do you really feel better by, calling a certain group of people, horrible and, accusing them of everything and saying all these awful things? Does it make you feel better when you're done with that? Because the people reading it doesn't. It just makes them angry and makes them hate you. And it just, to me, there's so much better things we could be doing with our time than getting on Facebook and ranting about nonsense. Still use it to get on there and say nice things. Get on there and say things like, hey, I hope everyone's doing okay at home tonight. If there's anything I can do for any of you, reach out to me. I'm sitting here in the house all day. I would love to speak to some of you, even if you just need someone to talk to. Let me tell you something. Mr. Morrie spends an entire day surrounded by his 12-year-old kid doing math. And that's it. I love it when my phone dings and I get an email from a random person. I had a student that graduated a few years ago just text me, check in on me. And that was terrific. I loved it. That's so much easier than getting on Facebook and trying to find some article about how everyone who has a certain political belief or religious belief is a complete idiot. And then just raging on them. Ridiculous. Just a waste of time. Sorry. This is a really hard section for me to keep small. I know a lot of you aren't going to make it to the end of this video either. Don't worry, I get it. We have one more italicized section here, and it talks about silence a little bit. Morrie does something weird. It's one of his early classes that Mitch had with him. He walks in the class and he just sits there. He doesn't say anything, and he just looks around. And everyone gets really uncomfortable because, and this is what he points out, he says, Morrie has he's gotten what he wanted all along. He wants to talk about the effect of silence on human relationships. Why are we embarrassed by silence? What comfort do we find in all the noise? And that's our lives, guys. And I'm going to close. We're going to hit about 30 minutes. I'm sorry. But our lives are noise. So much of it is noise. So much of the things around us right now are noise. You have a unique situation right now in this quarantine time to reflect on things and think and make plans about how you are going to live differently. You can turn off the Netflix. You can put the phone down. And you can spend some time up here and think about yourself and what you want to do differently and how you can be better. And I want you to do that. And then I want you to put it into practice. Think back to Fahrenheit 451. We talked about, learning something doesn't matter if you don't put it into practice. All right. I've challenged you each day to do something that involves putting something we learned today into practice. I want you to do that. I want you to just unplug, stop the noise, be okay with silence. Think for a little bit about what you can do differently, how you can improve your life, and how you can improve. And next year, guys, you guys get to be, the juniors and seniors, or you'll be the juniors, but, the juniors and seniors of the school are the ones that kind of set the tone for the school. And our senior class this year, I love them, but have set a horrible tone. All right. They just haven't accepted that mantle. I want you to do that. I want you to become a group that is known for being close and for being kind to everyone and reaching out to even the strangest of people, because strange is just a thing that culture decides for us. It's not the truth. Okay, so reach out to each other. Be kind. Don't use group chats as a way to insult, tear each other down. Use them as ways to lift each other up. Be that positive voice. A couple of you decide to do this, and it will change the whole tone of everything. Because people will realize all of a sudden being that negative voice is not cool. It doesn't make you a good person. You can have just as much stuff to talk about if you are a positive person as if you're a negative. And that's what I want you to think about, okay? All right, I way overshot my mark. I'm trying to keep these at 15 minutes. I doubled my time, but I really hope that a couple of you watched this whole video and got something out of it, all right? Hey, I love you guys. I hope you're having a great Wednesday, and I will be back tomorrow with our next couple of things. I promise to keep it a lot more brief, okay? Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate each of you.